I think the game's changing a lot. I think the way I learned to play golf is not the way people learn today. I'm learning new things about how to play on tour, how to kind of survive on tour, keep pace with this new generation, or try to at least.
Adam Scott didn't just make an announcement, he dropped a bomb on the golf world. What he said is changing everything about his career and the future of the sport. Insiders are whispering, fans are spiraling, and the entire tour is desperate to know what Scott is truly planning next. Today, I'll break down the entire story and what's behind all this. Career detonation. Adam Scott entered 2025 carrying the strange electricity of a man standing on the edge of something. Not decline, not retirement, but a pivot the golf world couldn't quite decode. At 44, he moved through tournaments with a calm that felt less like serenity and more like someone rehearsing a plan he hadn't yet announced. Fans noticed the patterns, the trimmed schedule, the sharper focus, the way he talked about balance, the way some players talked about birdies. His travel rhythm softened, his family presence intensified, and his committee work with the tour grew heavier, more deliberate. Something was shifting, and no one knew what he was building, only that it was coming.
Yeah, this is an event I look forward to every year. It's one of my favorite golf courses on tour. It's one of the best events that we play in every year. The event that I tell all my friends, outside of the majors, obviously, I think they should all come and experience it. I think it's a great atmosphere to play in. It's a great atmosphere for people to watch, so it's a real buzz to be here.
Insiders whispered that he looked less like a veteran coasting toward a sunset and more like a strategist tightening the final bolts of a long-game blueprint. He wasn't stepping away from competition, he was recalibrating it. Equipment reps mentioned secret prototype tests. Committee members hinted at unusually fiery governance debates. Even his swing, quieter yet more precise, carried the aura of a man preparing for a new arena rather than an exit. The golf world sensed the rumble before the quake. And then the hints sharpened. He appeared in meetings that aging players usually avoided and skipped events that aging players usually clung to. He spoke about sustainability, legacy, and time management with the subtlety of someone smuggling a confession between the lines. Commentators tried to label it as late career pragmatism, but the energy around him said otherwise. This wasn't a fade. It was a build. Only after months of speculation, coded interviews, and late-night rumor storms did the truth finally surface. Scott wasn't slowing down, he was rerouting. He was aligning himself with the rising TGL era, not as a ceremonial veteran, but as a foundational force, committing fully to the league's 2026 launch and stepping into a role that insiders quietly described as transformational. The move wasn't a gentle shift into the background. It was a calculated leap into golf's technological frontier, supported by Tiger Woods himself. Suddenly, everything clicked. The schedule changes, the strategic calm, the sharpened governance footprint. Scott wasn't inching toward the end. He was architecting his next beginning. And the announcement didn't just land, it detonated, rewriting the assumptions about how legacy athletes evolve and leaving one looming question behind. If this is his pivot point, what exactly is he building next? Major whiplash. The US Open felt like a weathered epic, the kind where the protagonist seems finally at peace, only to lurch into dramatic upheaval. At Oakmont, Scott entered with the calm of a seasoned warrior, but left with a performance that turned heads. He scorched a 67 during a stretch, stirring murmurs about a man who might be plotting one last grand assault. Yet on Sunday, reality crashed in, and his 72nd hole bogey struck like a cruel punctuation mark, denying him a playoff and turning that week into another almost story in his major ledger. Golf analysts struggled to contain their awe and frustration. They spoke of old man par golf in reverent tones, as though Scott's swing was simultaneously aging and refining. The contrast was jarring. A player who had been around long enough to be institutionally tallied as a veteran, yet still capable of delivering rounds that made commentators stumble over praise. It felt less like a man fading, and more like someone exactly at a crossroads, physically tested, but philosophically awakened. That final bogey on Sunday was laden with symbolism. It wasn't just a missed shot, it felt like a conjured echo of so many near misses over a career that's been defined by grace and heartbreak in equal measure. Was this the moment when Scott looked at his scoreboard and saw more chapters ahead than behind? Or was it the unspoken final drama before a graceful exit? The whispers began to swirl, and then came the behind-the-scenes speculation. Late-night Zoom calls with his longtime confidant Brad Faxon, prototype gear tweaks, a mini driver quietly tested, allegedly custom-built for precision rather than distance, and the slow arrival of his family mid-tournament, turning his event tent into a strategy lab. Scott didn't just play that week, he manufactured a narrative. One insider claimed that his mood was less competitive urgency and more composed strategist, like a general mapping out the next campaign. In those days, every swing, every call, every gesture seemed loaded. And by the time the weekend closed, fans and pundits alike weren't just wondering whether he'd retire, they were speculating whether he was reloading, and if so, for what? Boardroom shockwaves. Just weeks after the dramatic stretch at Oakmont, Scott's next move rippled off the fairways and into the boardrooms of Golf Power. And it wasn't small. He quietly joined Tiger Woods' future competition committee, a name that sounds clean, almost bureaucratic, but insiders say it functions more like the Avengers of modern golf governance. Their mission: to redesign how the post-merger golf world looks, from media rights and tournament schedules to player equity, travel policies, and long-term strategic architecture.
No, look, it's the kind of course where you need a lot of things to go right to be in the mix. The penalty is extreme. I mean, I think that's a trait of Pete Dye golf courses. There's water everywhere. It's hard to recover from the water, and a couple of visits to the water during the week makes it hard playing catch up, because then you have to force it and then you have to risk, and it's there, but if you're not on it, it's hard to always post a good number here. Hard to get it in the clubhouse the last 3 holes.
Scott emerged not as a passive member, but as an intellectual force. According to insiders, he delivered what was described as a 45-minute presentation, monk-like in cadence, but fierce in content. He proposed a global equity blueprint that drew heavily on his own experiences, decades of jet-lagged travel, President's Cup resentment, and a quietly simmering frustration at golf's US-centric power structures. The proposal was not a mere wish list, it was a manifesto, masked in PowerPoint slides and strategic calm. Commissioner Jay Monahan is said to have reacted like someone struck by revelation. The narrative isn't that Scott was pitching, but leading, guiding the discussion toward what many saw as a more sustainable, globally equitable future for elite golf. He wasn't just worried about his next tournament, he was drawing up the architecture of the next decade of pro golf. Meanwhile, gossip mills lit up with all kinds of conjecture. Some claimed Scott was setting the stage for his eventual exit, ensuring that by the time he hung up his putter, he'd left behind a legacy blueprint. Others argued the opposite, that he was cementing his long-term influence, ensuring he'd remain central even if his playing schedule thinned. Then came reports of a secret dinner, Scott and Woods meeting at Woods' Florida retreat, sketching out the skeleton of future tournament calendars on napkins. Supposedly, Scott suggested neutral site majors, a concept so controversial that traditionalists erupted while futurists cheered. Marie Scott, a discreet but powerful force, also entered the chatter, with people claiming she pitched venue ideas, travel flow designs, and even family-friendly infrastructure. The weight behind this wasn't just business, it was deeply personal. Scott, it seemed, wasn't just planning his career's sunset, he was planning its permanent imprint. He wasn't stepping aside, he was stepping up into a role few veterans ever attempt: architect of the future, family undercurrents. Behind every polished swing and whispered rumor, the Scott household operated like a finely tuned emotional engine, quiet on the surface, seismic underneath. In 2025, the family dynamic shifted from mere support system to narrative backbone. It became clear that every decision Scott made, from schedule to committees to simulator leagues, traced back to the gravitational center of Marie and their 3 children. Observers noticed how Scott's poise at tournaments had deepened into something softer, steadier, almost fortified by the invisible presence of his transcontinental clan.
What is the best lesson or piece of advice you have ever received? Probably one I received early on was to learn how to manage my time the best. When you're traveling, Playing golf always on the move, you really need to do that well, especially as life goes on and then a family comes into the picture. There's lots to do and not enough time.
Their home life, split between Switzerland's crystalline winters and the Bahamas' sunlit calm, looked idyllic from the outside. But beneath that glossy veneer lay a choreography of chaos: schooling in multiple languages, cello rehearsals echoing off mountain chalets, junior golf drills dominating patios, and FaceTime rituals sculpted around time zones. Bo trained like a young phenom, Byron tuned cello pieces that sounded like cathedral hymns, and little Björn recreated miniature Masters moments with a broomstick putter taped to resemble his father's iconic wand. The family was less a household and more a constellation, bright, scattered, interconnected. For Scott, the stakes weren't abstract. Every missed tournament cutout or elongated trip meant a breach of what insiders called the 3-week rule, a family pact forged after years of fertility struggles and jet-lagged separation. Violating that boundary was said to leave him rattled, prompting whispered tensions about missed milestones or recitals glimpsed only through glitchy calls. The family had endured too much to let distance fracture what they built. Yet the more the world speculated about Scott's shifting career path, the clearer it became that this wasn't a retreat into domesticity, it was an evolution towards sustainability. His committee work, his equipment experimentation, his TGL commitment, all pointed toward a life where home wasn't the sacrifice, but the anchor. And as fans watched the viral clip of the tear-streaked family huddle after a tournament near miss, the storyline shifted. Adam Scott wasn't just managing a career. He was negotiating a legacy intertwined with the people who shaped him the most. Every choice he made echoed with the hum of family gravity. Ryder Reckoning. The Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black unraveled like cinematic warfare. Cold air, roaring crowds, and pressure that clung to fairways like fog. Adam Scott entered Europe's locker room not as the headliner, nor the emotional spark plug, but as the dependable veteran who could steady storms rather than create them. Yet by the end of the week, he had become something else entirely. A catalyst, an anchor, and unexpectedly, a quiet hero of Europe's campaign. His opening session pairing with Shane Lowry turned into a study in controlled chaos. They faced an American duo radiating competitive fury, Wyndham Clark and Xander Schauffele. Their match unfolded in violent equilibrium, with Scott producing moments that felt almost mythic. Observers replayed his 3-wood fade around an oak as though it were a religious artifact, precision carved with the aplomb of an assassin using borrowed tools. Still, the 17th hole heartbreak, a lipped-out putt that seemed to taunt physics, reminded everyone of the cruel poetry that had marked so many of Scott's team appearances. Doubts swirled overnight. Should he continue playing or drift into a background leadership role? But on Saturday, he re-emerged in 4-ball with Matt Fitzpatrick, and suddenly the narrative spun. He drained long-range putts with serene inevitability, delivering a 3-2 victory that felt like a renaissance in motion. His broomstick putter, revamped with a Swedish cork grip rumored to be Marie's idea, became both meme and marvel. By Sunday's singles, he embodied the calm of a man carrying decades of ghosts. His duel with Sepp Straka ended in a clutch 1-up win sealed by a bunker escape so elegant it felt rehearsed by fate. Insiders whispered that Scott had spent the previous night revisiting old President's Cup footage, drawing strength from younger versions of himself. Europe's 15-13 triumph didn't hinge solely on him, but his presence became symbolic, a reminder that greatness doesn't evaporate, it recalibrates. Bethpage didn't resurrect Scott. It revealed the version of him that had always existed between headlines, resilient, deliberate, and frighteningly composed. And the Ryder Cup roar, that primal energy from fans, teammates, and critics, became fuel for the next seismic chapter. TGL upheaval. November arrived carrying the kind of narrative energy reserved for finales, and Adam Scott delivered a twist with theatrical precision. His commitment to the 2026 TGL launch wasn't presented as a gentle career tailwind. It was framed as a tectonic shift. What the public initially saw as a scheduling convenience quickly morphed into something bolder. Scott wasn't joining TGL merely to compete. He was entering it to help shape the frontier of golf's digital futurist era.
I think the biggest hang-up is in how we see, the highest level of competitive golf going forward. The product of Live and the product of the PGA Tour work in very different ways. So I think, the challenge is figuring out how that can come together and be really reunification, which is kind of what everyone is shooting for.
His Dubai interview, filmed in the swirling haze of desert winds, depicted a man discussing evolution rather than adaptation. And that word, evolution, became the cornerstone of speculation. The league promised shorter broadcasts, primetime theatrics, and simulator battles without the suffocating airline mileage of traditional tours. For a father juggling cello recitals and ski weekends, the format wasn't a novelty, it was liberation. And for insiders, it signaled a strategic genius. Scott could preserve his competitive edge and expand his influence without bleeding time. Then financial reports hit the rumor mill. It became whispered lore that Scott had secured an equity stake in Jupiter Lynx GC, transforming his participation into both a long-term investment and a power position. Suddenly, analysts started treating him less like an aging star and more like a board-level visionary navigating golf's technological renaissance. The backstory made it richer. Scott's involvement allegedly dated back to a confidential 2024 Zoom with Woods, a meeting where they dissected team structures and simulator layouts like generals crafting war plans. Scott proposed virtual adaptations of Royal Melbourne, a touch of Aussie nostalgia rendered through futuristic screens. Marie's architectural work in the Bahamas added another narrative twist, blending design with digital integration. The family wasn't just adjacent to TGL, they were woven into its creative subplots. Traditionalists called the move sacrilege. Innovators praised him as a pioneer. To Scott, however, this wasn't rebellion, it was optimization. It was a pivot that preserved legacy, family, and momentum in one stroke. And as he planned a 2026 homecoming doubleheader in Australia, it became clear. This wasn't an ending. It was the blueprint for a reinvented era. Adam Scott's career announcement didn't close a chapter, it rewired the entire book. What began as murmurs about retirement transformed into a saga of reinvention, family gravity, governance power plays, and technological evolution. His next era won't be quieter. It'll be sharper, stranger, and far more ambitious. And the meltdown? Only just beginning.